a gift.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So here
So
you go. Good morning, Wendy. Good morning, everybody. It's so lovely to see you all today. Where to start? Changing your path in life through forgiveness and self-compassion is such an important subject to me because I had to do it for myself. I went through things that most of us never expect. And then when they happen, they stop us in our tracks. But we don't always understand why. We don't always comprehend that actually there are bigger things going on. And those bigger things are within our minds, within our unconscious minds. And they come from our childhood. And they come from before our childhood, where we have a genetic imprint of traumas that have been experienced by our parents or our grandparents that are carried on through our genetics and our DNA. It is an extraordinary journey of learning that has brought me, in essence, peace and allowed me to flourish, allowed me to become who I am, and allowed me to find myself. I didn't realize how much of me had never actually come to the surface until I started doing the work. And it's what I implore all of you to do, is to take that time to realize that the traumas you're experiencing now are actually very deep-seated, and that we have to be compassionate to ourselves and learn how to forgive ourselves as well as forgiving others. The scientific proof that shows how powerful forgiveness is. But it's no good if it's a one-way ticket and you just keep giving it to everyone else. It's actually more important to give it to yourself. Forgive yourself for the things you see as failure, because they're not. Forgive yourself for the reactions that you could not control. Voice how you really feel. Voice the intensity of the pain and the emotion that has been holding you back for so long. Neuroscience shows us that our silence is often peaked when we are in extreme trauma, because our brain turns off blood supply so that we physically can't express ourselves. How powerful is your mind? How powerful is your body to respond to your mind? I didn't know that until just a few short years ago, and it changed my perception of everything. It taught me that all of those times when I wanted to say how I felt, and I was terrified, I was so fearful that my heart would pound in my chest, and it would pound through my ears, and it would sound like guns going off, and it was just so debilitating that I would be stuck in fear. And now I know it was my brain and my unconscious mind saying, sorry, I've got to stop you. I've got to protect you. You can't get into that. I'm stopping you, and I'm going to do it now. It is so amazing when you learn to acknowledge how your mind and how your body work together, and to truly acknowledge all of the experiences you've had and not dumb yourself down, not hide away the feelings, but be really honest about them. You'd be amazed how many other people will stand there and say, me too. because over the years that I've spoken about my experiences, I'm always astonished at the people that put their hands up and say, me too. It's powerful to know that when you've been brave enough to speak about something, someone else feels brave enough too, and you may have helped them to start their healing journey. And I think that's the greatest gift, really. You know, it's not about glory. It's not about praise. It's not about wearing a big badge on your sleeve. It's about who you can help from heart without any need for anything else. And that's so powerful. And it's been the thing that's lifted me and helped me to grow so much over all of these years.
I love what you're saying about the mind switching off, because I know when I've been triggered that I can't learn anything, I can't think about anything new, I can't process anything, I can't seem to get anything in my brain.
Yes, because the brain physically, in stopping the blood flow, actively stops any part of the brain from working. It actively stops it accepting information, and it actively stops it letting go of information, i.e. through our speech. And so we're in this stasis where we're just stuck. And that's why women who go through domestic abuse, whether it be emotional and physical, actively often find they cannot leave abusive situations. And others around will say, well, why didn't you leave? I don't understand. And you find yourself saying, I don't know. I couldn't do it. You know, and in this last few years, since I really understood the depths of grief, and then I started to learn about brain trauma and neuroscience, and all of the really, really meaty stuff that goes behind trauma, I suddenly realized where I'd been and how although I knew the behaviors, the language that I was experiencing were not right, I was so stuck in my own childhood trauma that I couldn't respond in a healthy adult way, because my broken child inside that was scrabbling around in the dark, trying to get forward and go, couldn't. And that child inside me in my unconscious was just coming up and getting more and more agitated and more distressed, because I didn't know that was there. And that learning curve of understanding that and then taking it apart piece by piece. And it's going to be a lifelong journey. We all have it, and we will always have it. You know, it goes back to the archetypal onion where we're peeling off the layers. I've peeled off the really thick, heavy, yucky ones. And now I'm really right down here on a lot of the smaller ones, because I've dealt with so much of the tough stuff. You know, and it goes back to as simple as an angry teacher in class, or skinning your knees, or losing your teddy, because it's the reaction from the adult that you're expecting that's going to soothe you and comfort you and calm you. Well, I don't know about you, but when I was a child, I was told, have you broken anything? No. Are you bleeding profusely? No. Well, then just, you know, lick your fingers, wipe it clean, and get on with it. So that bit of me that needed comfort and care and love didn't get it. And it wasn't because my mum or my nan were being uncomfortable about loving me and caring for me. It was just the way life was. People didn't have time for that. So it was just cast aside. And that, obviously, you know, when you look back at war, that was even more prevalent in our grandparents, and for a lot of us, our parents' generation, because they lived with that mindset that they've literally got to brush themselves off and just get on with life.
Stiff upper lip.
And yeah, and the compassion for themselves just isn't there.
Mm.
You know, and when I look at the journey of the last few years of the last few months of my mother's life back in 21, I look at how brain trauma and neuroscience tie so closely. I can see why she was so dead set on denying herself any kind of comfort in her death. You know, as in her funeral, her words were that she didn't deserve to have people to say goodbye to her, and that she didn't deserve to be cared for in her death. Just, you know, and it came from that place of no self-compassion and not understanding how to really care and nurture herself, because she'd spent her time doing it for everyone else and just fighting to survive all her life.
Mm.
And it's a very painful place to be stuck. And yeah,
It feels like society has forgotten to come from a place of love, compassion, caring, empathy.
Yeah.
It's almost like, and I can talk for myself, is that 54 I am now, or 53, I'm never quite sure. I'll say 53, it sounds much better. I've only learned in the last probably 3 or 4 years self-compassion and love, and I've had to learn it and I've had to work at it. It's almost like, especially when you're talking about trauma, it just doesn't exist.
Yes. And that, you know, we weren't taught boundaries. And that's a very big part of self-compassion and forgiveness. So we weren't taught those things. As a child, I was taught you say sorry to someone, and that's forgiveness. You know, you don't actively fully express why you're sorry. Whereas now, when I sit and I work through the people that I'm giving forgiveness to, I actively explain what it is I'm forgiving and why. And that's not necessarily done to their face, because actually, if you do that to somebody's face, they generally don't really understand, or they're very shocked, or they're very embarrassed, actually, that that's happening. And so they brush it off and they push it aside. Whereas when you take the time to sit down and write it in a letter or write it in a journal and have somebody else listen to those words without any judgment or criticism and with a very open heart, you are being witnessed in a very loving and honest, compassionate way. And the thing about that is we need to do it for ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves for those things. And as we learn to do that, our self-compassion grows, our empathy grows, and all of those other gentle, loving parts of us become more visible, not just within ourselves, but externally to others as well. You know, and it's a really beautiful thing to witness when you see somebody coming to life. And when I'm working with my clients, it's just the most beautiful gift. When I see them just unfurl in front of me, it's just beautiful.
It reminded me, as you were talking about, I have this theory about different reality bubbles that we live within, and I've had to work really hard at pushing myself into a new reality bubble rather than the one that I'm used to. And I'm absolutely convinced that there's individual bubbles of shared experiences that people, they either stay in the one because they don't know how to get out of it, or they stretch and they move into the other one. Just, that sounds a bit crazy as I'm saying it. Sounds a bit. I hope it's come across okay. But it's like we have to stretch into a new space.
And actually, that's very indicative, you know, of Facebook groups and other groups where you're an individual and you're stuck in this place of trauma. And you really don't know where to turn. And then all of a sudden something pops up on Facebook and it's a group and it's got something that feels right to you. So you join the group, or somebody invites you along, this place will help you. And you get into that group, and that's what you're describing, where you go into that group, where you're in the bubble with other people. And all of a sudden you're all sharing experiences that aren't dissimilar. You've all got your unique parts of what you've experienced that can be absolutely searingly destructive. But you've also got all the similarities. So then you start to feel connected. So instead of being outside that bubble where the bubble 18 years ago, my life felt like I'd hit a brick wall. Everything stopped. Running my family home, running my daughter backwards and forwards to school and to all her groups, running my ex-husband's business stuff that I did for him, doing my own job, looking after the animals, life in general. It literally stopped overnight. And it felt like my whole world had collapsed. And I was just in this melee of dust and destruction. And I didn't know how to move forward. And my heart hurt so much. I couldn't begin to tell you how much my heart hurt. And I didn't know how to soothe it. The tears flowed like rivers, not just for months, but for several years, because I was just stuck on this little whirlpool that was going round and round and round, and I didn't know. And then Facebook came along, and then it was quite some years before the groups really started to take off. 2014, I joined my first group because I was asked to be an admin in the group. The complexity of the people that were coming into the group was astounding, from all over the world. And I'm so grateful that actually some of those beautiful souls are still connected to me 9 years later. And I have some incredible friendships that I am so grateful for.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's called a pooch.
It's real life.
Yeah, it's real life. And so from being alone or alone-ish, all of a sudden we were a family, looking out for each other, loving each other, soothing each other. And we were within the bubble together. And there are hundreds of those groups, thousands of those groups all over the world. Excuse me, sniffy nose. It's called summer. I need one of these very quickly. That's better. And, it's when you see people grow within that space, just because somebody else has said, I hear you. Just because somebody else has said, I'm sending you love. When you're in your deepest, darkest place and you don't know where to turn, it's extraordinary. And so actually the bubbles are really lovely, and they're very potent and very powerful. And as we all start to grow, some of us step up and grow a bit faster, and we feel a bit safer because we've got that groundswell underneath us, pushing us on, even though nobody's saying, go on, go and do this, go and do that, go and do the other. But you know that in their hearts, they're willing you on. That's a really powerful part of how you change trauma.
Yeah.
Is that support and caring for each other.
So how would you say that the trauma that you've experienced, how would you say that's like played out and impacted on your life?
Oh, massively. My ex-husband had family who were killed in car accidents. It had a huge impact on our relationship, on our marriage, on our family life. I couldn't support his grief because I didn't truly know how to, because I didn't know how to truly support my own grief. But I did the best I could with what I had at the time. I didn't understand the trauma that kept me in that place and created the reactions that I brought into the marriage over those years. I do now, I see it very clearly, but at the time I didn't. Going through the divorce was a baptism of fire, because it needn't have been that way. To be suddenly separated from your only child and suddenly find yourself being told you're not a mother anymore it's a real knock to your whole emotional system. You know, it suddenly has you questioning who you are. And I did question who I was. You know, was I a mother? Was I a wife? Was I a friend? Was I a sibling? Was I a daughter? Was I any of those things? When in reality I was, but my emotional internal combustion engine that was going like the clappers was just throwing all those fears and beliefs and well, it was like lots of little spikes going off all at once is the only way I can explain it. And I didn't know which way to turn. And I was just in this deep-seated trauma. And it was stifling. It stopped me in my tracks more times than I care to consider. But then, you know, the animal instinct kicked in and said, you have to live, you have to survive, you have to keep going. So the undercurrent, the inner, you know, the little tiny Neolithic brain was kicking off big time and saying, you've got to live, you've got to survive. And that was just like a little thread keeping me going underneath and just poking at me and telling me that I had to stay alive. I had to get well. I had to be able to work and I had to do those things. And I literally felt like I was just being carried on by some powerful force that I just didn't understand. I didn't know where it was coming from. You know, and I had life-saving surgery in early 2007. I had a singular gallstone. It was almost the size of a tennis ball. And the surgeon told me afterwards he'd only seen 2 of those in 24 years. And they are caused by extreme stress and distress because the body goes into massive calcium buildup and it literally pours it like milk. And my body couldn't process it and get rid of it. So it was just getting stuck in my gallbladder. And all I could think of when I was in that ambulance was, I need to be alive for my daughter. I need to get through this. And actually at the point I was in sepsis shock. So I was very, very ill. And I look back at it and I think, where did that come from? You know, where did it come from that I had to stay alive? I had to keep going. And it was that inner bit of me that just wouldn't let me go. You know, it was telling me there's more to you and you've got to keep going. And obviously you don't know what it is yet. And I can't tell you what it is yet, but you've got to keep going. And it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I felt so alone, so isolated. I had no finances, so I couldn't do anything financially to take myself away from it or to give myself any respite or reprieve. So I was stuck to all intents and purposes in that place. And when I look back at it, I'm quite astonished at the experience because I feel so far removed from it now. But at the time, it was bleak, it was dark. It was unmentionable, actually.
People that find themselves in a similar situation, what are some of the things that they can do to just start the healing process?
Well, one of the very first things is actually to remember that you are a vital, healthy human being. You might not feel it. You might feel so unhealthy for whatever the reasons are. And that's because your body is trying to protect you and keep you. So it says, well, I'm going to bring up an illness. I'm going to create this that's going to stop you or slow you down or whatever. Those things can be healed. It's about healing the emotional and being really loving to yourself. And that starts with really simple things like breathing techniques. One of the simplest breathing techniques is box breathing. Breathing out for 4, holding for 4, breathing in for 4, and then holding for 4. And what that does is it helps to soften the levels of anxiety and to center you within yourself. And there are lots of other breathing techniques. You can research them on the internet. If you put in breathing techniques for anxiety, you'll have a whole pile of different ones come through. So if the box breathing doesn't quite work for you, there are quite a few others that you can practice. And it might sound really, really strange, but actually another really excellent one for anxiety is to have a glass of water with just a couple of inches of water in the bottom and a straw. And to have the straw and pop it into the water and just hold in a gentle position where you're not having to put any force. And then just gently blowing into the straw so you're creating bubbles in the water. Now, that might sound really, really weird, but that is about you concentrating your focus on your breathing. And it allows that gentle flow of energy that just centers you. And if you can just gently blow, no pressure, it's just that very gentle flow. And then take your lips off and breathe and then flow again. Because obviously you don't want to breathe in and breathe all the water up, because that's not the idea. I did that the first time. It goes up your nose and makes you splutter. It's not good. So that's actually a really wonderful exercise. And that's a really great exercise to do each day, just to give yourself that small. And if you do that several times, that really helps to center. It helps to bring your heart rate down. It helps to bring your breathing into a more regular place. And it allows your nervous system to just say, oh, thank you very much, the sun's come out. It's a really lovely little exercise. It's actually an exercise that they use often for singing, for softening the vocal cords and for allowing the throat to relax. And that's very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. And another thing that's so powerful is people forget to go outside their front door. Everybody thought I was completely bonkers when I first came to live in Newbury, because after work, every single day I took myself out, come hell or high water, what the weather was doing. And I had several different walks I did around the town. Got told off by a few policemen for being a lone single female all on my own. And I'm like, well, what can I do? It's not like I could just go and grab the bloke off the street and say, would you please walk with me? So, it's about having a little bit of courage, and I was having a walk one day and I got home, and one of the people that I was living in the house said to me, what were you doing at that bush? And I said, what bush? He said, oh, down the road where you were walking, you stopped and you were nodding your head at the bush. Ah, it was the little bird that was telling me off every time I was walking past its little nest. So I got talking to it. But that was a really special moment every day where I engaged. And it didn't have to be human engagement. Further down the road, there was a dog that barked and ran to the fence. Further down the road, there was a cat that would come and greet me. So they didn't have to be human interactions, but they were very powerful in bringing me out of myself and bringing me into the present. You know, and I don't care who thought I was bonkers talking to the bird. The bird and I had a great friendship. You know, and I was privileged to be able to see that bird hatch its chicks. You know, I was a bit close to its eggs to begin with, but it soon realized that I literally was just going past. And I was just, you know, not really interested in it. So it was, it's powerful, you know, or just taking that moment to stop beneath a tree and just to look up and experience the power of its canopy and the energy it has with the soil. You know, we forget we come from the earth and we go back to the earth. You know, and just popping your hand on a tree and just really feeling into that moment and just forgetting everything else. And actually it's a great time for the box breathing because it really helps you to center yourself. You can almost feel the flow of the tree. And that is so powerful when you are in deep anxiety, because it does bring you back to that safe place within yourself. It's very powerful.
Yeah, because it's so easy to isolate. And actually, I think it must be one of the things that we all have in common is the isolation that comes with when we isolate ourselves when we're experiencing trauma, extreme distress.
Yes. And, you know, if you're experiencing financial trauma on top of that,
That's awful.
it becomes very isolating, you know, and that's what was happening to me. And I didn't realize quite where I was until I looked back many years later. But the extremity of it was totally isolating. I'd gone from having my own home where we had our house phone, and we had, you know, in the early days of mobile phones, so people could contact you. And I was completely isolated from my marital home and from my friends because I had had to move for the job that kept me alive. I suddenly couldn't afford to have a conversation with anybody, and I didn't have a phone in the shared house because the exorbitant cost of telephone calls back in 2005-06 negated me being able to pick up the mobile phone and make a telephone call to anybody outside of that 20 minutes we had that was my emergency calling, and that was it. And it's amazing how fast 20 minutes disappears when you don't want it to. So I was isolated from being able to walk down the street to a friend and have a cup of tea, or even just to go for a walk with a friend. And when you're suddenly cut off in that way, it's like being put in a box with a very heavy lid being put on top and not knowing how to push the lid off. And actually pushing the lid off is that first thing with opening the front door and going out in whatever the weather is. And actually just getting out and allowing the rain to fall on your face and allowing the sun to shine on you and allowing the wind to blow through your hair. Because it's powerful healing energy. And you can embrace it in such an extraordinary way if you open your heart and your mind to it. And if you make friends with it, you know, people are afraid of enjoying that just for themselves when they're in trauma because they don't know how to. It's how you make that space for who you are and how you soothe who you are in the best way you can.
It can be very, very challenging. And what you've described is a very raw, painful, challenging, isolating, just that overwhelming sense of confusion. Who am I? You know, and it's that thing of not understanding why it's happening. It's like, what have I done? What have I done? Not being able to figure out what it is that I've done to cause such a reaction, to lose so much so quickly, and to not understand why.
That was exactly it. There was such a visceral reaction to me saying, I can't do this anymore. It's destroying me. And, I really think we're better off not being together anymore. And I want a divorce. It was that visceral, destructive commotion that I couldn't make sense of. I could not make head nor tail of why all of a sudden people who I thought loved me literally went for the jugular. I just couldn't understand it. People who I would have put my life on the line for in another life, including my daughter. And it wasn't until many years later that I understood how adult manipulation changes how children think. Because that's when I was starting to understand trauma, which explained how I'd reacted, which explained how I'd gone through the experiences I had in childhood and how I'd taken them into adulthood without understanding what I was carrying. Yeah. I just did not know what my baggage was when I, thought I was going on my big adventure, getting married and going to live in the countryside in Oxfordshire and start a whole new life. When actually I had gone from a family environment to isolation. And I didn't look at it like that, because to me, it was starting a whole new life. It was this adventure of marriage and creating a new world and creating a new relationship with my then husband. And I didn't understand any of the things I experienced truly until I came away and I started to peel the onion. And peeling the onion was my biggest grace.
And it's great that you got to peel the onion, that you had enough insight to what's the word? I can't think of a word. Not dive into. Seems a bit harsh. I'm looking for something that's a bit more compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
To immerse yourself in.
Yeah, I was unpacking. I was unpacking layers of trauma. It's a bit like a jewelry box where you've got the really bright, blingy, beautiful, gorgeous stuff right at the top, because it's, it's like your engagement ring and your special earrings and your watch and those things that you wear every day. And then further down, you've got the really special, precious things that only come out on a birthday or a high day or a holiday. And then you've got the inherited things. Grandma's brooch, granddad's watch, somebody else's cufflinks. So you've got all these layers, and each layer has its own story. Each layer has its own traumas, its own baggage. But if you don't understand that you're carrying those things around with you, then it's a bit like having, I think that a lovely analogy that came to me, I went on a glass blowing experience. It was a Christmas gift from my lovely Simon. And the first thing we had to do was to blow a bauble, which is actually the weights that are used in fishing nets on boats. Just that ball of glass with a great big bubble of air inside it to make it expand. And it suddenly dawned on me that that was my growth, that I was blowing air back into myself with each little pocket from that jewelry box that I was undoing and taking apart and being more inquisitive with and cleaning up with a bit of love and nurture. I was creating those baubles within myself that were buoying me up and lifting me up again.
Wow. I love that.
And yeah, it was such a powerful realization. It took me all day for it to dawn on me. It was when they all went into the oven, and you saw these pieces. So there was the glass bauble, And then there was the very heavy paperweight. They couldn't be more opposite to create, because, you know, it's the same puff and the same blow, but it's a different force of energy behind it.
Yeah.
And then there was the vase in the afternoon, which was the creation of what I'd learned in the morning. And suddenly I saw how I was transforming in those 3 items that I made. And I look at them today, you know, they're dotted around the house, and I'm so proud of the vase. It gets used all the time when I can, even with the cheapest little reduced flowers, you know, in they go. It's a reminder of just how far I've come. And it's a very evident reminder that I've created from my own energy.
Nice.
That I could not have done 18 years ago when I started this journey.
Yeah.
That I really couldn't have actually done before, when I was living in that place of constant trauma that was being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced.
What a journey.
Yeah. It's, you know, people say we're all in the same boat. We're not.
No.
We're all in our own little coracle, our own little boat, and we're all going up and down on the waves, and some of us all go up at the same time, and some of us all go down at the same time, and then we're all in the different places in between. And I've been in a very vast, very choppy ocean for a very long time. And now I'm in smoother waters.
Debbie, how can people get hold of you?
So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. I offer a free half-hour consultation, so people can connect with me in any of those places and just PM me, and I will ensure that they have the connection details they need.
Fabulous.
It's yeah, I'm very happy for people to just say, I heard you talk and I really need to chat. You know, I'm not going to turn anyone away, because I remember those days of not knowing who to turn to, or being so distressed that I actually couldn't turn my grief off, and it was repelling people, you know, with the constant emotion pouring out of me, and I just couldn't switch it off. So I will never turn anyone away.
Great. So is it just your name that people need to look for?
Yes, I'm known as Debi Richens, the Soul Phoenix, and yes, it is just my name everywhere. You know, if they pop my name in, if they spell it the old way with double B-I-E, they won't find me. But if they spell it D-E-B-I, Richens, they will find me.
Right. Final thoughts?
My final thoughts. You can grow. You can change by loving yourself first. And loving yourself is not an egotistical thing. It's actually a very essential thing. And that loving yourself first is the first part of the journey of self-compassion, is being truly honest with your own words about how you feel about where you are and what you want to change. You know, how you want to grasp life and how you want to live life, rather than how life might be for you now.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to speak to you again.
Thank you, and to you, Wendy. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Take care, lovely.
And you.